to Bob's Radio Cafeteria. You can find me at facebook.com/Bob's Radio Cafeteria. And this week, folks, this month, this year, my guest today is the one and only Howie Gordon. Howie, how are you? I'm
terrific. I guess you should say that I was a.k.a. Richard Pacheco. Pacheco.
Oh, Pacheco.
Because in that, I was an adult film actor, and Howie Gordon only mistakenly appeared in a couple of movies. That's another story. Most people know me as Richard Pacheco, a.k.a. Howie Gordon, the author of Hindsight.
Right, absolutely. And before we start, could you tell people where they can find you on the Internet?
www.hindsightbook.com. www.hindsightbook.com.
Now, before we start,
go ahead.
Before we start, I just wanted to ask you, how did you come up with the name Pacheco? Because it's a Portuguese name, and I was just wondering.
Yes, it is. I learned that.
Why did you choose that name as your porn name?
Well, I was at that point in my career. I was planning on moving from the porn world, which I thought I'd only make 2 or 3 movies, a la Sylvester Stallone and Italian Stallion, and then go on to my legitimate career. So I was using a different name in every movie. And I, at the time of making a movie called Talk Dirty to Me, I was Dewey Alexander.
Oh,
Dewey was from Huey, Dewey, and Louie, Donald Duck's nephews.
Yep.
And Alexander was from Alexander the Great, a man who needed no introduction.
Absolutely.
And we made Talk Dirty to Me, and at the end of the movie, Anthony Spinelli, who was the director, put his arm around me and said, "Kid, you did a great job in this movie, but I'll tell you what. I don't want any fucking Dewey Alexanders in my movie. Pick a new name." So I turned to his son, who had written the script, and I said, "What's my name?" And he looked me up and down and said, "Richard Pacheco."
Oh, wow.
He stood there nodding his head. And I said, "How do you spell it?"
That's awesome.
That movie, Talk Dirty to Me, caught fire. It wasn't Deep Throat fire, but It was big within the X-rated world. And the phone started ringing for Richard Pacheco. So I got stuck with that name.
Is there still people to this? Because I've always been curious about, there are obviously people like Alice Cooper. He's Alice Cooper, but when he gets off stage, he's Vincent. But I'm sure fans will call him. Do you have people that still call you Richard, or is it pretty much now it's just Howie?
Well, if it's media people, they call me Richard because that's the name that was on in the movies. If it's friends, I was never Richard privately. I didn't go by Richard. On the set, I was always Howie. Everybody knew I was Howie. But you had to. We have to qualify this by saying I was active from the years 1976 to 1986 or so. So my information is dated. When I talk about the industry, I'm talking about that industry. I really have not kept up with how things are going these days. But there were a lot of crazy people out there in the universe. And when you take the stage on sexuality in this world, you leave yourself open to the bedbugs of the world. You don't want your home address out there. No. And right away, the phone starts ringing at 3 o'clock in the morning, and guys are saying, "Hey, do you have a big hairy dick?"
Oh my God!
My wife said, "I think it's for you."
How did she know? Wow, what?
So it's funny. You protect your phone number, you protect your family, you protect your name.
Absolutely, and like you said, and especially in the time when you were in the business, because I was reading this thing and it made me laugh so hard. Is because they compared when you were in the business, you guys were like the Negro League. I love that. I love that comparison because at the time that when you were in the business, it was a time of people being busted. Even though it was making a lot of money in the theaters. That's back when there was the theater days. But you had a lot of support in San Francisco, correct? Wasn't Mayor Feinstein? Wasn't she kind of tolerant of the porn business?
You're breaking up on me. I'm not hearing your full questions.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm saying at the time of when you were in the business, there was a lot of busts and stuff like that. Do you think that and at the time, San Francisco, Mayor Feinstein, seemed to be more supportive of the porn industry? Is that element? I can't speak. Is that true, or is that just hearsay from years of?
I don't think she was particularly supportive herself. I don't think she could mount any effective campaign against the industry. Is what the problem was. You had the Mitchell brothers, who other cities didn't have. And the Mitchell brothers were a gathering place for artists, intelligentsia, movie stars, politicians. That was an incredible event that no other city really had. And they would gather there, and including a lot of popular politicians. So if the Mitchell brothers would get any political pressure from anybody who wanted to capitalize on an anti-porn campaign, they would... They had a lot of support from the people who had been seen there and photographed there and that kind of stuff.
So it's kind of like almost like, okay, if you want to go down that road, well, we've got some information.
The Mitchell brothers used to say, I would love to have a fight like that because they had the goods on a lot of powerful people.
And the Mitchell brothers building is still there at the corner of O'Farrell and Polk Street, I think, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, you're breaking up a lot on me. I'm able to get the gist of some of your questions. If I don't get them, I'll answer what I think you're asking, and if I go off point, interrupt me and let's go at it again.
Okay,
the other thing I wanted to say is that there were two centers of production during the 70s and 80s, New York and San Francisco. And the only reason San Francisco was a center was because L.A. was very... anti-pornographic in terms of what they would allow to be shot in the city limits, and they put a lot of police pressure because all of the companies that shot in San Francisco were from L.A. They would have to load up all of their equipment in trucks and drive up the coast at a large expense to be able to shoot. And then once the movies were shot, they'd go back to L.A. and do all the post-production in L.A. because that didn't involve any performing. And when they were busting people left and right in L.A., which is why they started coming up here. And in San Francisco, the attitude of the gendarme was no harm, no foul. If nobody complained, nobody cared. So it became a thriving industry. You could only call quasi-legal as opposed to legal.
Right.
As I said, if there were complaints, then occasionally there would be busts up here. There was one big one in Oakland, I remember. That I was driving to the set that day. When I got there, I saw a whole lot of police cars, and I just kept going.
You're like, okay, I'm going to go to Hayward, whatever.
Yeah, I think I'll go to McDonald's and have a burger instead.
It's so interesting because if young people listening to this and are familiar with porn, they're like, why would that? That's amazing, but it was a different time. Now, of course, you have a book out, and that's really exciting. Hindsight. Tell us about how that came about. Was there just tell us the creation of it, how it came about and everything, and who was the lovely model on the cover as well?
Well, that's a French painting from around 1900, so I don't know.
Oh, so it's not you. Okay, I was just
no. That's Galatea in Pygmalion, a depiction of the mythical figures by Jean-Léon Jarome. It's a wonderful painting. It's interesting enough because he actually did 3 paintings of the same scene, and you got to remember he's painting in 1900. He did one from the front, one from the rear, and one from the side view of the same models.
Wow!
For 1900, that was a hell of an idea to shoot that kind of to paint that kind of way.
Also, a lot of patience on those models' parts.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how long they actually. Once he had the front, he pretty much could do the side and the back, I guess.
But the book...
I'm a writer, and I was a writer all along. When I did my very first film, I thought it was going to be one and done, and I wrote a piece after that called An Adventure into Every Man's Fantasy, which pretty much is true. What would it like to be a guy in a porn film? Because I was not your big dick thespian. I was somebody who I was an amateur actor. I hadn't ever been professionally trained, and I only had like a normal-sized penis. Most of the guys who were working in porn are hung like horses. So
Absolutely.
I didn't think it was a profession where I was going to have more than this one experience. But what happened was I happened to come along at a time when they were trying to make movies where they thought if they could do actual films where you just added sex to the movie instead of doing just straight sex scenes, loops, which had been popular before that, you could make more money. So they wanted actors involved. And most actors, people who had been trained, if you got known for being in an X-rated film, you weren't going to get any more work. That was just that. You were just
That was
shunned.
like a death wish. That was the kiss of death. Excuse me. Yeah.
Well, everybody in porn, except for the actors, went on to have straight careers. Porn was a great training ground for all the crew people, but none of the actors.
Of course.
The only one that's made any noise at all, I guess, would be Jenna Jameson. Nah, not much. Tracy
Not
Lord.
much. Even that's still just.
And you get cast as the porn star. You get cast as the whore. I mean, so even though they got to make some R-rated movies, they weren't very far afield from what they were doing in X.
No, exactly. They're not going to be making any Disney films anytime soon.
So where did Hindsight come from? The fact that I'm a writer, the fact that I have kept diaries since 1965.
Wow.
And I have meticulous records of my entire career. I'm up right now. I'm up to about volume 160 something.
That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah, well, a writer writes, so you're right.
You're right. Yeah.
And the professor, I remember, who wrote that on the blackboard in 1965 at Northwestern University said, "A writer writes, try to live an interesting enough life that it's worth reading what you have to say."
I love it. Oh, that's great. Simple and to the point. Bam.
So I wrote my first article. I wrote my first article after that first movie, and then I had more movies, and I kept the notes in the journals. And I think I retired for the first time in 1982. I had had a horrible experience with a woman director named Svetlana, who was the worst director I ever had. She was like an improvisational sadist who liked to work her evil magic on actors. She would lie to you and smile at you. When you're director, director is daddy. Director is the head of the family. And when the director's fucking with you, you got no place to hide.
There's nowhere.
She loved that relationship that and everybody who works for her generally has some horrible things to say about her. Anyway, without getting into that, I ended up coming out of that movie after 10 days in L.A. I also had worked with a woman named Shawna Grant. Do you know that name?
Yeah, I do. And she committed suicide, correct? Or she died tragically?
Well, we're not sure. The official stance is that she committed suicide.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there's confusion about that in my mind. I saw her 10 days before she died. And it was at the Erotic Awards in 1984. She was up for many awards. She had been the overnight sensation of the industry. And by the time the awards came, she was actually out of the business. And she was living with a cocaine dealer, a big-time cocaine dealer. And I saw her at the awards, and she invited me up to her room for a drink. And she wanted to introduce me to Francis Ford Coppola.
Oh, wow.
Her date for the evening.
Right.
And
San Francisco Bay Area, man.
Yeah. While I would have loved to have met Francis Ford Coppola, I didn't think that was the time or place because I didn't think he was in her room to meet me.
No.
So I declined. And then...
as a true gentleman would. As a true...
Yeah. And my wife was also not very fond of me reconnecting with her because she and I had an off-camera relationship.
That would.
And my wife was not pleased about that. She didn't mind what happened on camera, but off camera, those are the ones we had difficulty with. And I tried to explain off camera is what makes the on camera work. It's just all part of the dance.
Boy.
That didn't go over very well.
No.
But this is all to answer your question about Hindsight, because Hindsight is in the largest picture. I'll get back to that story in a minute. Sure. Is the story of my career, but it's also the story of my marriage. I was married the whole time.
Right.
And my wife is my life partner, my soulmate, if you will. And very few people in that industry were married, performers, and very few performers who were married survived. And yet we just celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary.
Happy anniversary. Wow.
Thank you very much.
40. And you have 3 children. And actually one of my favorite, where I became familiar with you, because I'm not what you would call a porn aficionado or whatever they say, is the wonderful documentary, which is on Netflix right now, called After Porn Ends. And your parts are some of my favorite. And my favorite part, and I think you know where I'm going to go with this, is when your daughter, you are talking. And I love what she says. And I love your reaction to what she says to you. You know, just like, you know, you're pretty cool. You're a cool guy, you know, and like you're a great dad. And to me, it was very endearing and very real. And it says a lot about your marriage and your children too. So, and grandchildren, correct?
Yeah, 2 of them now.
Wow. You're on fire, kid. Look out.
It's what happens when you don't pull out and squirt in a woman's face.
Yes, you are listening to Bob's Radio Cafeteria. Also, I mean, one of the cool things, too, is who wrote your foreword but the legendary comedian, actress, Whoopi Goldberg. How did friendship become between you two?
Well, Whoopi came to Berkeley before she was famous. She was the lover of a fellow named David Shine, who was one of the Blake Street Hawkeyes, a theater group here that was founded by David and John O'Keefe and Bob Ernst. And I had met them at the Magic Theater, where I started my acting career in Berkeley. And when the Magic Theater folded in a political coup where John Lyon took the theater and moved it to San Francisco, John O'Keefe and Bob Ernst took over the warehouse at 2019 Blake Street in Berkeley and started teaching classes. And I had signed up for those classes, and my wife did as well. So we were taking classes from the Hawkeyes for about a year. And then David met Whoopi in San Diego, where she was working as an actress, and fell in love with her and brought her to Berkeley.
What years would you say this was around?
That was about 1976.
So just before you, or just starting in the business, but just before. Gotcha.
Yes,
okay. I just wanted to get a time scale here. Okay.
I had done like 4 or 5 movies. You know, when you see a date of a movie, that's not when you shot the movie. That's when it got released. So,
right.
My first movie, I think, is The Candy Stripers, and it's listed as 1978, but that actually was shot in 1977 and 76.
Gotcha.
Anyway, so David says to me, Whoopi has is not. I keep confusing autism with dyslexia. I think dyslexia was what he was saying, that she can't write because she doesn't see. She can the letters get reversed and this and that.
Yeah.
Whoopi wanted to do a screenplay, a treatment for a screenplay. She saw herself in a Western with Dustin Hoffman and wanted some help writing it. And David asked if I would help her write it. I said, okay, and she came over to my Berkeley cottage one day. Now, as I said before earlier when we were talking about protecting yourself,
yes.
When you are a porn star, people make assumptions about who you are. One of the first assumptions is that you want to fuck 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Of course.
And like I said, I was married, and I also, we learned pretty early on, even though we came through the sexual revolution and free love and all that stuff, we learned pretty early on that we had to make a protected zone of our house or our apartment, wherever we were living, so that we wouldn't be putting each other through those kinds of changes when the other person had nowhere else to go.
Exactly.
So when Whoopi came in the front door and sat down, I said, okay, the first thing is you and I are never going to fuck.
And there's an introduction.
And she looked at me and said, I don't remember asking.
Oh, great answer. Perfect answer.
She said, okay. And that began the relationship. We wrote the screenplay. It never got made. And what's of interest is that we had been Hawkeye fans for 3 or 4 years and had gone to all their performances. And sometimes there'd be 20, 30 people in the audience. Sometimes there'd be 2 or 3. And they'd perform anyway. The Hawkeyes were like the Navy SEALs of acting. These people put in the time every day. They were from University of Iowa. They were very serious actors. Oh,
henceforth the name Hawkeyes. Got it.
Yes, right.
Got it.
So when Whoopi became part of the group, all of a sudden, 50 people were there, 100 people, 150 people. All of a sudden, there were audiences showing up, and that was confusing to them. To the Hawkeyes didn't know what to make of that, and Whoopi talked about always knowing that was her fate, that was going to be there for her when she was ready for it. She had I'm sure she talked about this herself, so I don't think I'm talking out of school, but she had issues with drugs and this and that when she was younger, and she had the sense that if she got famous during that era of her life, she wouldn't have survived it. And she would have been like a John Belushi
or something like that.
Yeah. And while she was doing that part of her life, she kind of just moved around and worked on her craft. And when it all came together, she was doing a one-woman show in Berkeley called The Spook Show. And she took that to New York City, which a lot of Berkeley artists did. There was a PS 147, I think is the place, that showcased new talent in New York. And she went and did the show there, and Mike Nichols happened to see it. And Mike Nichols said, I want to put this on Broadway. And Whoopi literally went from nobody to Bob Hope. Wow. There was no in-between. There was no slow rise. She went from welfare and to the penthouse. And that was astonishing to watch.
No, she deserved it. She's a very, very talented actor, actress, and very funny comedian. And
human being. What's really the most astonishing thing to me about Whoopi is how she's grown into the part. I mean, like I said, this was a welfare mother who now sits down with presidents, and she's really grown into it. It's a pleasure and a great joy to see how she's handling all this stuff. She's just an incredible human being.
She's cool. She's actually, a lot of people try to pretend they're cool, and she just seems super cool. She seems really super cool. Like someone, if you saw her, hi, how are you doing? How are you? That's what it seems like to me. So what, you contacted her and said, hey, would you mind doing a forward to my book?
Yeah, exactly. She said, sure. I said, thank you.
It's great. It's really, actually, you can read it at on hindsightbook.com, and there's a really great picture of you two together. She went with you to the, I guess they call it the X-rated Oscars, but she was so cool. That one must have been a nice little highlight for you to be like, hey. Now, so when you got when I was mentioning the documentary, which is on Netflix, After Porn Ends, you also got out of porn because it was getting to that time of, AIDS was becoming rapid, and your wife kind of said to you, like, hey,
November 10th, 1984. San Francisco Chronicle headlines. AIDS crosses into heterosexual community. First instance of AIDS moving out of being a gay disease to being a heterosexual disease. 2 prostitutes had infected 2 Johns. Screaming headlines. And this was November 10th. I had 3 jobs lined up for the Christmas season that I wanted to do. It was going to make for us, it was a lot of money. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to not do these jobs.
Right.
But that afternoon, Michael Rossman, who was one of the leaders of the free speech movement at Cal of the early 1960s, became a good friend of mine, and he came over my house, and he was a mathematician. He said, I've been doing some projections based on the figures that they've talked about, and you're in the wrong business at the wrong time. You got to get out.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to hear that. My wife jumped all over that because by 1984, we had 2 kids. Yep. And she had gone from someone who thought it was cute that her husband was in this world to something that she wished her husband was done doing.
Wow.
I, on the other hand, had gone from being nobody and going through, we didn't get into any of this, but I was terrible in the beginning of my career at having sex on camera. I was hitting about 500, which means half the time I couldn't get aroused. And
wow.
What do you call a porn star who can't get a hard on?
What?
An actor.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, for your listening pleasure, a pornography joke told by a former porn actor himself. Yay!
So, the only reason I was tolerated, as I said before, is because I could act, and they were trying to make movies. So eventually, I did learn how to do it, but that's a whole other story.
I think people liked you because you seem like generally a really super cool guy and a likable person. So I think.
Well, thank you, sir.
That had a lot to do with it, too. I wouldn't leave that out as well. And
so 1984 was like, I'm at the top of my career now. I'm making $1,000 a day. I'm getting to pick the women I want to work with. I'm getting to write the scenes so I'm not embarrassed by the stupidity of them. I'm beginning to be offered a chance to direct my own films. I did not want this to be over. I'm actually taking hot tubs in Hugh Hefner's pool.
Wow.
I liked this place. I had worked hard to get here. I didn't want it to be over. So I said to my wife, look, I'm going to go do these movies. They're just trying to sell newspapers. They're trying to scare us. I'm going to go do this. And I went ahead and did it. When I came home, it was late December, and I'd done 3 movies. And I remember reaching for my wife in bed that night. And she says, do you think we should?
Right.
And I said, what?
Yeah.
Being a little put off that there was any question at all. And she said, and I'll quote you verbatim, don't you think it would be prudent if one of us remained alive to raise the kids?
That's right.
And that was the brick wall.
That's it.
I crashed into it, and when I woke up in the morning, I was retired and monogamous.
And that
lasted a year because
you got back into it, but
nobody knew what the cause of AIDS was, how it was being spread. There was all kind of fear and rumors going on about mosquitoes bite you, suck your blood, and then bite somebody else, and it's a blood-borne disease, and nobody knew what the fuck was up. So
just for the younger listeners out there that weren't around at the time, in the early '80s, the mid '80s, AIDS was beyond, and it was such a scare.
It was,
and like you just said, nobody knows. And then all of course these ridiculous rumors. Monkeys in Africa, a mosquito can bite you, and people were. It was mass hysteria. One of the things
that's right.
What makes me nervous now is that people don't really think about AIDS as much anymore, HIV. So I almost feel like we could be coming on to another epidemic of it because people are. It's not, we don't think about it anymore. It's not, people are living lives with HIV. But just so people have an idea of what, especially younger listeners, have an idea of what it was like back then, especially, so when your wife said that to you, it was like, wow, this is a heavy-hitting statement and what was going on in the world.
Yeah. And what I did was I went, since I had lost my career to AIDS, which on the one hand I was upset about, on the other hand, there were people dead. San Francisco was devastated by the AIDS epidemic. The gay life had just been really hit hard. I used to get my hair cut at a place called Jerry Short's, and there was a very popular place, like 50, 60 barbers and beauticians and this and that were there. I think they all died of AIDS. I think the whole place just disappeared.
Lord. Wow.
It was at that level. I mean, AIDS was a death sentence at that point.
Yeah. And it wasn't like now where you're living, the rest of your life. It's like it's pretty much it was a death sentence. That's it.
We're at the point now where with the proper medication, it's not a death sentence. You can live, and we're also on the edge. They just put into human trials not antidote, what do you call it? You get inoculation against a disease.
Immunization.
Immunization.
Oh, yeah, immunization. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. They're on the edge. So, it can all become, like, it can go the way of gonorrhea and syphilis. And if that happens, we're going to be looking at another sexual revolution because, hallelujah and motherfuck.
Dennis Miller had a funny skit, in the late 80s on this album he had an album called the Off-White album. This is when he was on Saturday Night Live, and he said, boy, imagine the day they cure AIDS, which is, of course, in 1988, still around. He's like, boy, if you can't get laid on that day, you've got problems.
Yeah.
But you still continued on, though, after you got out of...
a year later, the term safe sex crept into the national consciousness. They had the AIDS found... I was going to tell you, what I did is I got trained... After I stopped working, I went on. I mean, I was telling other people, my colleagues, "What are you doing? Why are you risking your life?"
Yeah.
And I got very mixed responses. Some people, like Alex Dorenzi, who was a great director of the era, he called me up and said, "How would you like to work with a hot newcomer in the business named Tracy Lords?"
Oh, Lord.
And I said, "Well, until they figure out this AIDS thing, I'm not working with anybody." And I don't think
that was probably a smart idea.
Well, and I said, I don't think you should be making this movie because our lives are at stake. He said, look, I know how you feel, But if that's the case, just don't say anything because you could hurt the industry. I won't. Well, so fucking what? The industry should be put on hold until we figure out if we're going to all die.
Yeah.
It didn't carry any weight. The people whose economies, whose means of earning a living was tied up in the industry, put their heads in the sand and just went on. Paul Thomas, who was a big-time actor in my era before he became the director, he said, look, when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. Annette Haven, who was perhaps the major star of the industry in the 70s.
Huge name,
She took a position like mine. She said, we have to wait and find out what's going on. But so the responses were all over the place. And I went to work to become an AIDS information specialist so that I would know what the fuck I was talking about. And I thought the disease would be over, the epidemic, the fear part that we were stuck in, would be over in 3 or 6 months. I mean, somebody's going to find up some. People aren't going to stop fucking.
Yeah.
And I remember taking the classes in San Francisco the first week, and there's the one symptom, the Kaposi sarcoma, the purple blotches. They're really scary. You get these huge purple blotches all over your body. Ooh. And a lot of the people who were teaching the AIDS information classes were AIDS sufferers.
So they had those blotches on them?
Yeah, a lot of them did. And
wow.
What was scary to me was some of the people who taught the classes the first week were dead the second.
Oh, my Lord.
And in my house,
you were in San Francisco, though. You were in San Francisco.
No, I was in Berkeley.
You were in Berkeley.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that in my home, I have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Right.
Or a 3 and a 1, because they're 2 years apart. And I'm going over there, and nobody knew what was communicating the disease. So I don't know if being in the same room with these people, I'm exposing myself. If you hug somebody, are you exposing yourself? If you shake hands, if you kiss, nobody fucking knew. And the fear level was so high.
Yep.
And then when these people were like dead the next week, it was all too crazy. I didn't know what I was bringing in the front door to my kids, so I bailed. I couldn't handle the pressure there. After 2 weeks of that, I just went, no, I'm not doing this anymore.
It's too much. It's too much stress. And plus, again...
And that's when I wrote the first book. That's when I started writing Hindsight.
I
wrote the first
interesting.
Version. I retired and started writing the book. And I'm really glad that I didn't get that published. And the reason is because everybody who's in that business, when they sit down to write their memoirs, and most of us do, the first thing you write always sounds like this. I'm an unlikely porn star because they're really bad, but I'm not. I'm really good. And the whole fucking book has that overtone because the guilt, taking the public stage, it's overwhelming. The public wants to lynch you by and large, or certainly a large portion of it does.
Yeah.
And then I used to think that, and sometimes I was more afraid of my fans than I was of my enemies, because they're the ones that are calling you in the middle of the night saying, "Is your dick
big hairy dick?" Yeah.
And they want to fuck you. And the schemes that happen, I wrote some of these in my book, like, people calling you up and saying they're producers and they want you to star in the movie and they love you and you're in a big part, and you go, okay, I'm being discovered. This is great. I'm Lana Turner and at the counter at Schwab's. And then as the conversation goes on, you realize, uh-oh.
Yeah. I think this person is
crazy.
doing something. Yeah.
And by the time it gets to the place where they want you to meet them at midnight for a secret meeting in their motel, the only question left is who's going to bring the Vaseline. And
yeah, exactly. Why am I in deep East Oakland at 2 a.m.?
Yeah. I'm being discovered.
Yeah, it's being discovered, quote unquote. But you did continue
in the middle
on.
Of 10 different questions here. I don't know which one you want. I mean, you want to have a follow up to Shawna Grant. You want to
sure, whatever. It's your interview. Wherever you want to go. That's how I love to do. That's how I do my interviews. Is like people take it where you want. That's why I'm not
follow
really.
Up to Shawna Grant. Just
sure. Because there are a lot of people out there that are fans. They like to know. They want to know about those stories. And so, Sean, you saw her at the awards.
I saw her at the awards, and she invites me to her room. And at the second time she invited me, my wife was out of the room with the kids somewhere, so I went to her room, and it was just her and me. And I get in the room, we start talking. She'd been out of the business for 6 months. She's been involved with cocaine. She told me, I'm not taking that anymore. And I said, well, that's good, because her cocaine use had become an industry joke.
Oh, wow.
And so that was good news to hear that she wasn't doing the drug anymore.
Right.
And she said to me, quote, if some people knew that I know what I know, I'd be in a lot of trouble.
Whoa.
And I said, well, that sounds like a good group of people to get away from. She said, yeah, well, I'm trying to do that now.
Oh, man.
And so...
so that's why is that...
And a week later, she's dead.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. So that's why there's some speculation, into, like, because it kind of reminds you like the Marilyn Monroe thing. Like, speculation was always like she was going to go public with her affair with Bobby Kennedy, and then all of a sudden... Yeah. Wow. I'm going to read more about this.
The other thing is that she's supposed to have shot herself in the head with a rifle. How the fuck do you do that?
Yeah, especially a tiny... Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, but everybody, the police seemed to think it was a suicide, and there was some suicidal behavior early in her life, so that said, well, this person was that, and certainly cocaine, there is cocaine psychosis when you're...
Yeah.
And I think, the other thing is when I saw her that night at the awards, after she had told me she was off of cocaine, like, I ran into her at the elevator. She ended up not winning anything that night, and it went from being a huge night for her to being a sad night. And I saw her by the elevator by herself, and we were both going up in the elevator, and she's sniffing. And I thought she'd been crying, and then I realized she's on coke.
Back on cocaine.
And then I realized she was on coke. And she said, well, it's a big night. I was celebrating. So she indeed wasn't off of coke, and yeah.
It's a fair assumption to say that. I mean, when you were in the industry, cocaine and drugs was rampant on the sets, correct? Or is that an unfair assumption?
Well, yes and no. To set the stage a little more clearer, in 1979, everywhere, cocaine was the new marijuana. If you pulled out a joint, you were like a dinosaur. Because everybody was snorting coke. And I'm talking about doctors, lawyers, dentists, bank managers, everybody. It wasn't just the adult film industry. Right. And why I hesitate to say that the drug use, when I snort cocaine, when I did, and I had my share of that time, in my mind, I'm red hot. In my dick, I'm ice cold. So if you have to fuck on camera, you don't want to snort coke. No. I didn't want to snort coke. It depends on who you are. Other people snort coke, and their dick just immediately jumps to attention. So it was your own personal chemistry dictated what you took before a sex scene. I couldn't get near it because I was unable to function on cocaine. I would enjoy myself, but it would take hours and hours and hours.
And they don't have the time nor the money to sit there and wait for Richard to...
Nope, I'm having a call on my cell phone from New York.
I hear that, yes.
They'll have to leave a message. Fuck them.
They'll have to leave a message. Or you can just say, I'm at the cafeteria. Click. Gotta go.
If I knew how to use my cell phone. I'm 67 years old. You got to use cell phones to me are like, another galaxy.
And as I've told you off the air, you look absolutely fantastic for your age. It must be the Portuguese in you. I mean, maybe.
That's it. There you go. My son married a Brazilian woman, so he's fluent in Brazilian Portuguese now.
Now, speaking of that, so obviously you grew up in New York, Bronx, Queens. Where did you?
Pittsburgh, PA.
The accent, though, that throws me off.
I hated that accent so much growing up there that I haven't. It's ironic because I couldn't stand it. It's a kind of that comes out of Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio that makes me want to just scream. And when I started working as an actor, I can do any accent I hear. I can't do that accent. I hate it so much. I'm unable to ape it. I can't get to it.
Oh, so Pittsburgh. So you were what an area that a lot of people have come out of there. Of course, Andy Warhol and yourself.
John Leslie. John
Leslie.
Know?
Oh, he was from there too. Oh, wow.
His name was John Nuzzo. He was from Beaver, right up next to the airport.
Beaver Falls?
No, Beaver. To go believe John Leslie was from Beaver, but that
just writes itself right there. Like, right. Yeah. Joe Namath, Johnny Unitas. I mean, so many people.
Joe Montana.
So many people. Both of us living in the Bay Area.
Dennis Miller.
Dennis Miller.
He is.
There you go.
He became a Republican. And Keaton, Michael Keaton's from Pittsburgh too.
Wow. So there's a lot come out of there. So you just, you came from there, which is a predominantly working class, middle, hard working town, known for its steel, of course. And you end up, now your family, did they know? I mean, because this is a classic question, and there's sometimes it's kind of like if you go to New York City, and it's like, do you want to see the Empire State Building? Well, yeah, but it's so touristy. But I guess I should say just to say I saw it. Well, this question I'm about to ask is like, well, if you're talking to someone who was in porn, it's kind of like the tourist question, but it's like, you kind of want to ask, did you tell your family about it, about you were in the business, and what was their reaction?
About 4 years into the business,
okay.
I'm coming home from a wedding, and I'm drunk, and the phone's ringing inside my house.
Yeah.
And there's no cell phone. I mean, there's no answering machines yet, so I'm trying to put the key in the keyhole.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time doing it. I finally get it in. I rush to the phone. I say, hello? And this voice goes, "You're busted." It's amazing how fast those two little words can sober you up.
Wow.
But there was something in the voice that was not right.
Yeah.
And I said, "Is this Jimmy?"
And he said, "Cousin Burton saw you in a porno film and told your parents."
Oh, no.
So it was my cousin Jimmy calling me from Pittsburgh, and I'm going, well, if I'm getting busted, how does cousin Jimmy know, and why is he calling me from Pittsburgh?
Yeah, exactly.
And then I realized it was about cousin Burton. Okay. Cousin Burton was a lawyer for Valium, and he worked in Washington, D.C.
The drug Valium.
Yes, he was a lawyer in the Valium empire. And he had taken the afternoon off, and at that point there was no home video. All the X-rated movies played in theaters.
Film, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so he went to the movie theater and saw me in my very first film.
Oh, my Lord.
And he jumped up, Candy Stripers.
Yeah.
He got in his car, drove all the way out to Maryland, picked up his wife, and drove her back downtown to D.C. into the porno theater and said, "Is that Cousin Howard? Is that him? Is that him?" And she said, "Yes, that's Cousin Howard."
Oh, my God, that's amazing.
So Cousin Burton calls my parents. He's going to tell on me.
Oh, Jesus.
I was 32 years old.
I'm telling on your parents, Mr. 32-year-old.
I haven't been home in 14 years, and he's telling on me. When he calls my parents, they're not home. Nobody answers the phone. So he calls his mother, my Aunt Lil, and he says, "I just saw Cousin Howard in a porno film." And Aunt Lil, his mother, says, "Oh, well, don't call his parents and tell him." Now, the reason she said that was because Aunt Lil once took my mother to see Last Tango in Paris.
Oh, Marlon Brando.
Do you know this movie?
Of course, Marlon Brando. That's a classic. And the butter scene. Come on.
Yeah, that's it. When Marlon Brando started putting butter in Maria Schneider's asshole, my mother grabbed Aunt Lil and made her leave the theater. So Aunt Lil didn't think my mother wanted to hear this news about her youngest son.
No.
And she made Burton promise not to tell my parents.
Because obviously if she can't handle butter in the anus, she's not going to handle
Howie in porn.
Exactly.
So it dawned on me, well, how did Jimmy know this? Because this was Cousin Burton and his mother. And I said, did Burton tell you this? And he said, "No, Aunt Kitty told me." And well, if Aunt Kitty knows, that meant that Uncle Manny knew, and Uncle Chink knew, because that was Lil's husband, and that meant that everybody in the family knew. But Jimmy says to me, "But don't worry, they all promised not to tell your parents."
Oh, my Lord.
Okay, so now I'm imagining the next bar mitzvah, and my parents, everybody's pointing at my parents and snickering behind their back.
Yeah, like, oh, there's Howie. Oh, hi, Howie.
So I got to call home and tell them, because they got to hear it from me and not from them.
Yeah, because it would be worse if it was the other. Yeah.
Now I wasn't looking forward to this, because in Pittsburgh there was no Mitchell brothers hobnobbing with the city's intelligentsia and artists and politicals. Mm-hmm. Pornography was in the hands of the mob. The theaters were at these rundown, crummy locations. Mm-hmm. It was a vice. It was racketeering. Yep. It was, in Jewish you'd say treif, not kosher, not good. And I had to have this conversation. And for moral support, I had my wife on the phone with me when I called home, and I get my mother. "How you doing, Ma?" I always called her Ma. It's like we were trying to be Italian.
Me too. I would call my mother Ma. Oh.
"Hey, Ma, what's up?"
Oh, it's the East Coast thing, so there we go.
Yeah. So my mother, she was ecstatic because my brother and his family were returning after 10 years in Israel. They had moved to Israel. And my brother, the Harvard Medical School doctor,
of course,
was coming back to the States because he couldn't handle the backwater of Israeli medicine. He wanted to be the best in the world at what he did, and the only place to get the education he wanted was in the United States. And somehow one of the number two, he's an eye doctor, the number two ophthalmologist in the world was in Pittsburgh. So my brother asked if he could work for him. The guy accepted him, and they're going to be coming back to Pittsburgh. And my parents were ecstatic. I was ecstatic because it took a lot of pressure off me to have him coming back to this country. So she's happy, and she said, so what do you want? And I said, well, Ma, a couple of years ago, I did an X-rated movie. Now, I didn't tell you about it because I didn't think you'd want to know. But Cousin Burton wandered into a porno theater in Washington. She stopped me. He goes to see those movies?
Oh, so that's good. That's good. That's good that she said that.
I say, well, apparently so, Ma. And then he was trying to, he told Aunt Lil, why didn't he call you? My mother asked. I said, well, that's a really good question, Ma. I don't know why. And she said, so that's your news? She's not stupid. She was waiting for all the bombs to fall before she jumped in. And I said, yeah, that's it. And she said, how much did they pay you?
Oh, wonderful.
I said, well, I got $200 a day for 2 days. Uh-huh. And then while the silence was speaking very loudly, I said to her, I worked with Marilyn Chambers. And my thinking is that fame has a way of mitigating things.
Absolutely.
And I thought the fact that I had been with the Ivy Snow Queen, the whole world
who then became the Behind the Green Door and all that stuff.
Right, right. Well, she said, who? So that didn't exactly matter. I said to her, the Ivy Snow lady, the one with the baby on the box of Ivy. You worked with a baby? No, Ma, I didn't work with a baby. It was big. It was on the front page everywhere. Marilyn Chambers was this porn star. It was
the Ivory Snow baby.
Blah, blah, blah. She had no idea what I was talking about.
So it just was making things worse.
Yeah. So she finally said, well, you want to know what I think? I said, okay, here we go. And I'm ready to become the excommunicated, the black sheep, whatever. I don't know where this is going. She said, she gave me the raspberry.
Wow.
And then I started laughing, and my wife was laughing, and my mother was laughing.
Aww.
So that's how that ended.
That's actually not so bad.
No, it wasn't at all. That was the best I could have hoped for. So a week later, my car dies, and I had to get the title to get rid of the car. My dad had the title back in Pittsburgh, so I call up to talk to my dad, and I tell him he's okay. I'll put it in the mail. Blah blah blah. And they said, hey, I hear you won some kind of award, and Jimmy had told him that I was voted best supporting actor that year for Talk Dirty to me. And I habitually just started to lie because that's what I've been doing for 4 years. And then I realized I didn't have to lie anymore because my mother obviously told him everything.
Yes.
And I said, yeah, and a little pride is creeping into my voice. I just won the Best Supporting Actor award. And he said, well, you want to know what I think? And here we go again. I knew how shy my dad is about physicality.
Of course,
I didn't get the lecture until I was 18 years old. This is the first time he ever said anything to me.
Yeah.
And then I was already involved in the world, and he's telling me just use protection. He never told me from what, but that turned out to be another conversation.
You mean bug spray when I go around mosquitoes? What I don't understand.
The Mafia dental plan. The Mafia dental plan is do what you're told and we won't knock your fucking teeth out.
That'd be a great name for a book, a movie, or a band. The Mafia Dental Plan. I love it.
You can have it. Just give me credit for it.
I will, of course.
All right.
So, but he was obviously, so that made everything a lot.
Well, he said, "You want to know what I think?" And I said, "Yeah."
That's right.
I was waiting to hear this, and he goes, "Do you love your wife?" Wow. I said, "Yeah." He says, "Does she love you?" I say, "Yeah."
I mean, he was asking it like that too, like, does she?
Oh yeah.
Like, wow.
He's trying to understand how the marriage could possibly sustain such a thing, because he was married, and I'm sure that these kind of, those issues had come up in some fashion in his life. He did share them with me, but they came up. I can't remember. There's another question or two, but essentially that was it. And
wow.
He said, "Well, it's all right with me," and I knew. When I've told this story before, in the sense that my dad's very shy, and my mother is like a stand-up comic. In the house, as soon as she took one step outside the front door, she was a very meek person in the world. But at home, she was a tyrant and loud and big. And the other thing about my family is that has to be said for the record is that I was raised with a mentally retarded uncle. He came to live with us when I was 4 years old, when my grandmother died. And he was the center of our family. His name was Izzy, and Izzy was funny.
But by the way, I love the names of all your family members. It's like you can't write a script better than this.
We're a Jewish sitcom. And at the center of the sitcom is Uncle Izzy, who's fucking batshit. Izzy.
But he was funny, you said. He was really funny.
Well, he didn't have it as that. He just was himself. He was not being funny. At best, he was operating at a level of an 8-year-old. That was the assessment when he was tested a couple of times.
Right.
But he was 8 years old for like 50 years.
We got
to be
Which isn't that bad of a thing, and I guess in a way it'd be kind of nice to, not have to have as much responsibility.
Yeah, well, that's what I tell people when they ask, how did you get to be the way you are? And there was my dad who owned a gas station and was up every morning at 5:30, winter, spring, summer, fall in Pittsburgh. Yep. And came home at 6 o'clock completely dead tired, would fall asleep on the couch. Yep. I had an older brother who never saw a B in his life, who was driven so hard to succeed. He was the first of our generation to go to college and ended up at Harvard Medical School.
Oh, the one that was in, the one you mentioned earlier. Yes.
Yeah. And then there's me. And the family myth was my brother's going to be a nuclear physicist, and I was going to be a gym teacher. Which shows you the high regard they had for my intellectual achievements.
Well, actually, did you ever play a gym teacher in any of your films?
I played a coach in a film, a physical coach, a trainer. This was a movie. I call it the greatest movie never made. It starred Seika and me. And,
oh wow!
It was called Sunny Days. For me, it was a payback film, where usually John Leslie got the lead part and I was the sidekick. And he'd have 4 or 5 sex scenes and I'd have one. Mm-hmm. And then there was a conflict, and it gets complicated. I'll just say I sided with our director, Sam, Anthony Spinelli, and John went against his wishes. And so for John's punishment, in the next movie, I got the lead, and he was the sidekick. And it was this Sunny Days movie. But it was an incredible movie because the producer of Sunny Days, the way the myth goes, and this is a myth, I'm not sure of the facts, I'll just tell you what I heard, we'll do the rumor story. The producer was a woman who owned a video store in Chicago at the ground floor of video. So she got a lot of money really quickly.
Yeah.
And she was gay and wanted to have an affair with Seika, is what I heard. So she goes to Seika and says, I want to make a movie with you. And Seika told her, I'm retired, as I recall. And she said, well, I really want to make this movie with you. I'll give you whatever you want. And Seika threw out a number. I think it was $100,000, which nobody ever got paid that much for a play.
No.
And the woman said, sure, okay.
Wow.
So Seika unretired very quickly.
Yeah, I would too, sure.
And Seika, who was a great sex performer,
legendary,
had a lot of good movies made that involved sex, but she wanted to make a movie where she wanted to learn how to act, is what happened. And Spinelli was famous for getting really strong performances from essentially non-actors. So she hired him, saying, look, I want to make this movie, and here's how I got the job, and I want you to write and direct this, and I want to be an actress in this. I want to do a good performance that I'm not embarrassed about.
Wow.
So Sam became the director. His son wrote the script. I got the lead part, and everybody, where the top salary I got from the rest of the industry was $1,000 a day, which was the top. I mean, John Leslie was getting that. Jamie Gillis was getting that.
John Holmes, all those guys.
John Holmes was another category because he was the only male who was box office by himself.
That's right. Okay.
For all the obvious reasons. And I don't know how he handled his finances, but he was well managed, and he was, and like Marilyn Chambers, they were like separate categories from everybody else. Those were the two biggest names. So I got what did I get for them? I think I got $1,500 a day.
Not bad.
Not bad,
especially at the time. I mean, Jesus.
Yeah, that was great. So I had 12 days worth of work in that. So this was a huge paying movie. We all did the best work we ever did. We shot on location in Chicago. We had police protection. This was just like the grown-up stuff. This was real stuff.
Wow.
And then when the movie was finished, they took the production back to L.A. to make a rough cut. Yeah. And this producer from Chicago came to L.A. and began to see the porn industry and meet other people in the industry. And she realized she overpaid everybody.
Oh, no.
Seriously overpaid everybody.
$100,000, yeah.
And she went apeshit. She went crazy. And she took the movie and said, this movie will never see the light of day.
Funny
and
that
it never did.
It never did.
It's sitting on a shelf in Chicago, and the chapter in my book is called The Greatest Movie Never Made.
And that's why I don't want to give away too much in this interview, because we want people to go out there and get the book and read about it.
Well, that would be great. The book is, 685 pages, but that's a little misleading because there's 400 pictures in the book.
Yeah.
So it's really like a normal length book of about 300 pages or so.
Yeah.
And
you just did a book signing in your hometown in Pittsburgh, correct?
I did. That was so wonderful.
I saw some of the pictures, and people just look so... First of all, again, I just... I don't do this because you're on the air with me or whatever. I really... You just really... when I first friended you, and just your first conversations with me was like, "Hi, Robert, how are you?" It's like, "Wow, hey, what's up? I just was watching you in a documentary." But the pictures, you look like you're having a great time. You really look like you're really happy to take these pictures, and to me, that's important. You can tell, and you can tell you've made a lot of people really happy. And so that experience, what was it? Was it an amazing experience?
It was because there were two streets in the center of the neighborhood where I grew up called Squirrel Hill. Forbes and Murray was this intersection, and when you're growing up there, it's like the center of the world. Forbes and Murray was like the UN headquarters. It was like Jerusalem. It was the center of the world that I lived in. And this bookstore was like
Classic Lines, correct?
It was like 20 yards from Forbes and Murray. So to go back there at age 67 and be just in that room was just
so cool,
unbelievable.
And I give a plug to if you're in Pittsburgh and you want to buy some books, please go to Classic Lines.
They are the only bookstore in the country that is selling my book.
Well, then there's more of a reason for you people to go to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Not to see the Steelers, not to see the Penguins, not to see the Pirates, not to see the Andy Warhol Museum or the Frank Lloyd Wright or whatever, none of that.
Or the Roberto Clemente Museum now.
Or the Roberto Clemente. Oh, my Lord. None of that. No. You're going to Classic Lines. And you're going to go there and you're going to buy my friend Howie's book.
Hindsight. True Love and Mischief in the Golden Age of Porn.
I just wanted to ask you. I was looking at your I can't speak right. IMDb. I just had to ask you, and if you can just put Richard Pacheco in. See, I see Pacheco because I'm Portuguese, and that's how we pronounce it. But Pacheco.
I thought it was Pacheco. They tried with an
some people say that it's one of those names.
In Brazil, they say because there's a giant drugstore chain in Rio called Pacheco.
Pacheco, wow! Because I actually went to school with a Richard Pacheco, which is really funny.
I wonder if it's him. There's another guy. He lives in Massachusetts. He's an actor and a director, and he's got a completely bald head with facial hair.
How old is he? Is he in my age, like mid-40s?
Yeah, I think he is. Because I noticed that our resumes have started bleeding on each other. Because
it's him. I'm going to check that out.
He made some movies in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they're listed on my resume, and I know I didn't make them. So I looked up, and I saw his picture, and that poor bastard.
I'm going to look that up. I'm gonna see. I'm gonna look that up. I'm like, oh my god, and I'll let you know. But I wanted to ask you on your IMDb page. Now, maybe this isn't you. Maybe this is no, it couldn't have been because it's from the 80s. So he would have been in high school with me. Well, then you never know. Debbie Does Dishes 3 from 1987. I'm sorry, I saw that. I had to acknowledge that. What is Debbie Does Dishes 3? Is that the kid I went to school with, or is that you?
That's me. I play a cop.
Awesome.
And I'm talking in a Yiddish accent. I was, hello there. Awesome. I was talking that way. It's funny. It's a funny movie. It's a funny scene.
Oh, I love it. So you did. So
Nina Hartley is the star of that.
You have a. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I didn't hear you.
Nina Hartley plays Debbie in that movie.
Berkeley High alumni. Come on.
Yeah.
She's another Bay Area.
I just talked to her last night.
How is she doing?
She called me up to talk Steelers. She's a heavy football fan. She's feeling terrible because the Niners got a shitty team this year.
Oh, they're horrible. Oh, my God.
She called me to congratulate me on the Steelers win, which was really weird.
You guys from that generation are really cool because, you, Nina, Annie Sprinkle. I was going to say Annie Sprinkley. Annie Sprinkle. Like, you're all very... I don't know words like you're all characters. You all have.
It's interesting that you put those three names together because so did the Nazi Party. About 15 years ago, they were writing. There was a fan directed me to their website, and there they were talking about me and Annie and Nina as examples of degenerate Judaism and.
Gross.
When you have the fucking Nazis on your tail, that'll get your attention.
I don't know if to congratulate you or to be worried.
It freaked me out. It freaked me
out.
That's gross. It freaked me out, I have to tell you.
No need. We have no need for that in this world.
Well, it's like something out of some fucking ghost out of the Holocaust Museum coming alive.
Yeah.
You want to think that kind of evil is dead and buried and we'll never smell it again. And,
please believe me. The things I overhear on BART, or the AC Transit here in the references, other people in other parts of the country don't, but our subway system here in the Bay Area or the buses here in the East Bay, some of the things I hear people say, I'm like, my God, is this 1950? Like, really?
Yeah.
It's scary.
It's a crazy place.
It is a crazy place. So it's been a privilege to be talking to you on Bob's Radio Cafeteria. The man with two identities. I introduced you as Howie Gordon, but you can also know him as Richard Pacheco. And no, he's not the Richard Pacheco that I went to school with, though it might get some hits from that Richard Pacheco. And then we'll find out. And then maybe you guys can work that out together. Again, tell people where they can find you on the website, on the internet.
www.hindsightbook.com. One word, hindsightbook.com. And that'll be my website. You can order a book there, and I'll send you an autographed copy. Be my pleasure. And the book, I guarantee you, will give you some laughs and some poignant moments. And I dare to think it's a book that transcends the genre. It's the book I wanted to write. I'm very pleased with it. I had to write the book because my children came along pretty much after my career was over.
Right.
And I wanted to write the book for them because they had taken it on faith that it was okay with my wife and me that they never inquired about specifics about how we handle such things. Well, now they're all married and they have their own families, and I wanted them to hear the story from us about what we were doing and how and why this worked for us. In part, there's I skipped the whole part of myself, and I maybe another time we'll get into it. But I grew up with the biggest breasts in the 7th grade. I was the fat kid.
Right, I think you mentioned that in the documentary after porn ends. Yes.
So the first time somebody asked me to take off my clothes to be in a movie, that was like winning the World Series. That was like a ticker tape parade down Broadway because I had spent 15 years of childhood being Quasimodo and being ashamed of myself and being confused. I have breasts. What am I doing with breasts? I mean, I remember
that puts everything into perspective, and it's to me it's like that's the ultimate redemption story. Really, think about it. I mean, you spent 15 years of your life having the largest breast in 7th grade, and as we all know, kids are cruel in school.
Oh yeah.
I'm a poet, and I don't even know it. And here you are. You grow. Good-looking dude becomes one of the top stars in the industry, and I almost forgot to mention. Great segue. 1978 or 79, you were the Playgirl Man of the Year?
Yeah, go Howie.
Man of the Month? I mean...
Centerfold in 78, November of 78, Mr. November, and then I won Man of the Year for 79, and they kept me on for an extra 6 months because it was good for business. I could walk and chew gum at the same time. And I wasn't gay, which a lot of those guys were, and they were trying to pretend that they weren't.
Yeah, and you actually were married and didn't have kids yet, but and there's the ultimate redemption. I mean, it reminds me of a story. I remember once watching a video, and my mother used to talk about this. Is that one of her favorite moments on the Tonight Show was when Janis Joplin was on. And when she was in high school in Texas, she was picked on. She was like, but when she went back for her high school reunion after she became famous, and she said that was the ultimate story of like, yeah, look at me now. And there you are, the kid that was picked on and was overweight, and there you are, Playgirl Man of the Year.
Yeah, that was fun.
How do you like me now? It's kind of like,
how do you like them apples?
How you like them apples? Yeah. Did you ever actually ever have anyone from the school days contact you like, oh my God? Like,
I was just there last week. A guy I graduated
Pittsburgh.
with was named. It was inducted into our high school Hall of Fame.
Cool.
So I went back so I could stand in the audience and cheer for him. I don't know if they have the balls to put me in the Hall of Fame, given the scandal level of it all.
They
but,
should.
It certainly all know about it, and. I was the senior class president, so every time we have a reunion, I mean, we go back and I'm I love being president. I've been in office longer than Castro.
You're amazing. I mean, I think you've broken all records. I mean, how long was Stalin even in president?
Yeah.
I don't think he was even that long.
Yeah.
You're a man among men, my friend.
Well, thank you,
40 years, being married 40 years.
Yeah.
We're just talking about how you were a heavy-set kid in school, goes on, one of the top performers in the time in the industry when it was very tough to be in industry because of all the backlash and the busts and all that, and then Man of the Year on the Phil Donahue show, and then writes this book and has 3 wonderful kids, and also you can in the documentary.
You're hired. I want you to be my agent. You're doing great.
Oh, okay. And then there's this documentary called After Porn Ends, which I highly recommend. It is on Netflix now, folks. And
there's a couple of other documentaries. There's one that came out about 3 months ago that's on Showtime about the greatest X-rated films ever made. I was in a movie called Nothing to Hide, which they have at number 2, I think.
Oh wow!
They just did a second show called The Greatest Adult Performers of All Time, and that's going to play Showtime in April, and I was included in that as well.
Okay, so if you've got Showtime, folks, make sure to watch it in April because our pal here is going to be on that list, and he better be in the top 10. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, I'm honored to be considered in that because
you should be.
There are a lot of folks that there's a lot of competition there,
Who's going to be number one? Or probably who do you think? Bets on number 1. It's going to be Ron Jeremy, or it'll be they'll give it. So he'll be like in the top 5, right? Obviously, they'll give it to they'll put him in there. Or
well, that's just so ironic, because for us, John Holmes was always the man, and
absolutely,
Ron Jeremy. God bless him, because if you would have told John Leslie and me and Paul Thomas and Eric Edwards and John Holmes and the guys and Jamie Gillis, the guys
Harry
who were my peer
group and all those guys.
Yeah, if you would have told us that Ron Jeremy was going to become the face of porn, you'd have gotten laughed out of the room.
He's made quite the career for himself.
He worked so hard to become what he is. I take my hat off to him. He really earned it. He 24/7. He wanted to be Ron Jeremy, and he made it happen. And now he's the face of the industry. So he
very interesting documentary on him. If you ever have, I don't know if you've seen it, but if anyone out there, there's a really good documentary about him. It's really interesting about how his life is and what he's like.
Hey, like I said, he's earned it. Nobody has worked harder to become famous in this world that I've ever heard of.
Well, I'm still glad that you're around. I'm so glad that you've been on my show. It's been an honor and a privilege. You are beyond what I thought you'd be. I knew you were going to be super cool, but you are very articulate. You're awesome, and I really appreciate it. And anyone that comes on my show, I appreciate it. It's an honor, and it just get to know people, and that's part of what I do here at Bob's Radio Cafeteria. I always like people to know more about the person. It's like, a lot of the stuff we know, but there's other stuff I want people to know. And, of course, there's always an invitation. You're always welcome back at the cafeteria anytime. So that's an open lifetime invitation. So you're now you're like the Berkeley Free Clinic. Once you get in, you're in there for life.
I've been there.
Oh, me too. So there you go.
Well, listen, when you're coming to Berkeley sometime, let's have a cup of coffee.
I would. Oh, that would be great. That would be awesome. And
you have to see my house. I think you'll enjoy my house.
From the documentary After Porn Ends. The toys, the things you're making in that little thing, because I collect toys, so I want to see these things. I would love it.
I give Barbie dolls nipples and vaginas, and I give Ken dolls penises.
You have to see these, folks.
They're hanging from my ceiling.
You've got to see these to believe. You can see it in the documentary. You got to see these to believe it. The man, Howie, you're all over the place. You're so talented. You write, you create.
Like I said, you're the best agent I've ever had. You're doing great.
Thank you so much. And so that does it for this edition of Bob's Radio Cafeteria. You can find me Facebook.com/Bob's Radio Cafeteria or YouTube.com/The Clarences. And Richard, you can find, of course, with his book Hindsight, you can find it HindsightBook.com. And one last time, Howie, Richard, Howie, however you want to be said, I'll call you Howie. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.
You too, pal.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.